Well, it is slightly past our start time of 4 o'clock. It's 4:08, so I'm glad to call the meeting of our HR and Compensation Committee to order. And from an opening remark standpoint, I'd like to advise that the notice of live stream, we are recording this meeting as being live streamed on the YouTube for public viewing. And due to the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, committee members are each in their respective homes and places of work for the duration of this recording. And I want to thank those who have joined us today, and to the members of the public watching our live stream or later the recording of this meeting. Just a second. From a land acknowledgement standpoint, I would say on behalf of the committee, we would like to acknowledge the traditional land which we are virtually gathered is Treaty 6. We would like to thank the diverse Indigenous peoples whose ancestors' footsteps have marked this territory for centuries, such as the Cree, Dene, Saulteaux, Nakota Sioux, and the Blackfoot peoples. We also acknowledge this as the Métis homeland and the home of the largest concentration of Inuit south of the 60th parallel. It is a welcoming place for all peoples who come from around the world to share the Edmonton metropolitan region as home. Our agenda today is pretty straightforward. So I would look for approval of the agenda, a motion to approve the agenda. Sam, sorry, I just had to look at the screen. So Sam, I'll accept your motion. Any comments, questions, additions, deletions, changes?
Agree.
Okay, just putting our hands up this way. All those in favor? That motion has passed. So the next motion would be for the approval of the minutes of the July 14th HR and Compensation Committee meeting. Would be looking for a mover for that motion. Mr. Broadhead.
So moved, sir.
Okay, any comments or questions about the minutes? They were an accurate reflection of what took place, I imagine. Seeing no comments to the contrary, I would call the question. All those in favor? And approved unanimously. So I will turn it over to Mr. Jankowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you to the committee. Today, I just wanted to present a brief update on the stand-up of the HR function and organization. What I'm going to go through over the next couple of slides is an update with regards to the organization that we are now building and where we are in the retention or the attraction process for certain key positions. I will explain our thinking around some of the organizational elements that we're centering on. And then I'll move on to a discussion about some of the policies that we are working on. So let me back up by saying that we have, as the board is well aware, we've worked hard over the course of the last number of months to attract a couple of key personnel that have joined our organization over the last few months. And those positions, the people in those positions, the positions that are described on this org chart are the positions at the senior most level. The Director of Stakeholder Relations is Brian Bechtel, and the Director of Finance and CFO position in Lori Shea Smith. I've been working over the course of the last few weeks now with both of them to help refine the organizational structures within their respective areas, while we are continuing to move forward with the third one of the senior leadership team positions, that being the Chief Operating Official, the position that will be responsible essentially for all of transit operations. That job is out there now in the marketplace. We're going through roughly a 4-week call as supported by Karen Marner and Brittany Bryce from 6th Sense. those individuals, those external service providers have been working hard on developing the job descriptions. They've been working hard on getting the job ads out, while also working on a number of other initiatives that I'll describe a little bit later in the presentation. The Chief Operating Officer is going to be the next key position, and quite frankly, it's going to be the touchstone position or the keystone position for the organization, certainly as we move into consideration of all of the various elements of transitioning service from the existing transit operations within the 5 municipalities that have transit into this organization over the course of the next year. That position is going to be integral to formulating many of those agreements, structuring our integrated services and moving forward. So we're excited to see if we can attract some key talent. That position will hopefully attract somebody in the top echelon of transit operations across Canada. And in the meantime, we're also focusing on starting to, as I said, refine the structures with Brian and with Lori, looking at the functions within each one of the key areas under stakeholder relations and finance. If I can ask Agatha just to zoom in a little bit on the slide. First of all, on the stakeholder relations stream, what we've identified in that group of functions is communications, stakeholder engagement, and marketing. And we've also identified the need for, as we start moving into a greater communication stream and engaging with the public and others, moving into digital content management. We're well aware that many of our clients get a lot of their information from various digital sources, various media sources that exist out there. And we are very cognizant of the fact that in addition to developing content around communications, we also have to develop our communication streams. So digital communications is going to be vital to the stand-up of this organization. And the first 2 positions that Brian is going to be working on are going to be that communication person, the overseer and developer of all communications, and in the transition of some of those functions away from the private sector provider that has been helping us out, Berlin Communications, and moving it more in-house, as well as bringing in somebody to oversee the development of our various digital media streams, and somebody that will, on a kind of a continuous basis, I won't say 24/7, but certainly on a 12/7 basis, monitor those streams and work on making sure that we as we stand up this commission, we get the appropriate messages out and engage in the appropriate communication with our external stakeholders as well as with the public at large. Perhaps I'll pause there with regards to stakeholder relations before I move to the other vital position that we're moving for quickly, and that is starting to fill the needs on the finance side. I don't know if there are any questions with regards to stakeholder relations.
Gentlemen, any questions of Mr. Jankowski on that particular position? I guess seeing none, Mr. Jankowski, continue.
I think Councillor Munkoff Swain had.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. That's okay. Maybe could you just, in the interim, as we're setting this up, Paul, and recognize that's a tough job to kind of come into a new organization. Just your thoughts on how this group is going to work within the existing kind of communication stakeholder relations groups within the different municipalities. Just get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so I'll start off, but I might even ask Brian Bechtel to jump in. I know that one of the things that we were preparing for example, as we were preparing for last week's board meeting, had we gotten to the point of actually having a suite of or information to share with the public at large and start the communication around a new service plan. I know that Brian had been standing up a communications group with representatives from all of the municipal members of the commission. What we were starting to do was to start to develop common messaging and start to prepare for essentially one set of messages to be communicated from 9 different parties, making sure that there isn't cross communication. That's certainly the intent as we go forward. It will be to strengthen those initial ties that were admittedly developed during the original business case development and now are being refreshed under Brian's guidance. Our intent would be to work even in an even more coordinated fashion and integrated fashion to make sure as we get out and start communicating all of the information relative to the startup that all 8 municipalities are privy to the same information, and the same information gets shared with many of the constituents and stakeholders that will be talking to multiple parties across the greater Edmonton area. I'll turn it over to Brian, and I don't know if Brian's got any additional thoughts that Brian, you might want to share.
No, Paul, I think you've actually covered it really well. We actually did reach out with the support of the municipal liaison group and identified lead comms people in each municipality. And so I've created a terms of reference, which I've circulated to all of the members. We had a small meeting. I wouldn't say that everybody signed off in the bar yet because we haven't had a chance to fully discuss it. But the intent seems to be well received by our colleagues in the municipalities. I really see this as being something of mutual value, really, with information that flows both ways. But no, Paul, you covered it well. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Yes, appreciate that response.
And I see that Councillor Knack is in the process of joining us, and we would welcome him to the meeting. With that said, did that answer your question, Sam?
Sure did. Yeah, absolutely. Good answer. I appreciate the collaboration there.
Okay, good. Yeah, this is kind of an interesting juncture for this organization as we look at the build out of the overall operating position. So it's interesting. Mr. Jankowski, if you'd like to continue, please.
Sure. So perhaps I'll move then to the finance, or the suite of responsibilities and functions that we've grouped under the finance portfolio. And I say we, but essentially it was me that came up with this grouping. And one of the considerations as we were thinking about the suite of responsibilities within finance, one of the considerations was the differentiation of the skill sets that will be required to really oversee and deliver on those financially related functions, the functions of planning, budget development, monitoring compliance with the approved budgets, accounting in the development of budgets, and the ongoing accounting required to make sure that we're at every quarter or at every month we're in a good position relative to approved budget. The areas of risk management and internal controls, the identification, for example, of what our insurance requirements will be as we start evolving into an operational entity, how we manage our risks to minimize the financial exposure to the organization, the areas of procurement, which are typically in a public sector organization linked to finance or the administration of all financial functions, the development of a robust asset management plan. And certainly with regards to asset management, sometimes the skill set is a little bit different relative to asset management, but in the early days of standing up an asset management function, the integral skills are largely financially related, and the kind of the administrative roles of overseeing payroll and benefits and really dealing with all the accounts payable functions. All of those skill sets I was looking at how do they relate to some of the other skill sets that sometimes are considered in a separate area, that the area of corporate support services. And certainly as I started thinking about the skills that we will need as we very quickly mature from a 4 four-person organization into an organization that will oversee the operations and the integration of operations of multiple municipalities and multiple transit agencies, and the introduction of a number of staff into our organization. I quickly came to the realization that grouping financial services and corporate services probably wouldn't serve us well in, let alone the long term, even in the medium term. And so very early on, I differentiated in my mind the skills and the requirements associated with financial support of this organization from those other corporate service functions. And what I've grouped in the complementary corporate services portfolio are things like human resources and the inherent occupational health and safety, meeting those OH&S requirements, as well as dealing with labor relations issues. Those three areas typically get grouped together in organizations such as ours. And then there are the other value-added resources or strategic resources, often of IT and data analytics. The development of the appropriate data collection strategies and the identification of the processes to identify how the collected data can actually improve the organizational, the operational decision making within an organization such as ours. For the time being, I've grouped all of those services under a director of corporate services, but I think in the fullness of time, we'll probably recognize that some of those may merit being broken out of that organization as we grow and mature. But for the time being, I've kept the corporate services functions separate from the financial services functions. And over the last week and a half, since Lori Shea Smith has started, Lori and I have started to identify which one of those financial service areas we want to focus on first. And really it's that, and it should be no surprise given the discussion that we had last week with the board around the need to create a robust financial analysis around some of our service planning. What we're really focusing on as the next key hire will be the finance manager, that manager that will be responsible in many respects for the financial planning, reporting, and accounting. In the meantime, Lori is a great resource. She's got a lot of knowledge and competencies in many of these other areas. Lori's going to roll her sleeves up, she's assured me, and she's going to be involved in trying to meet our needs, meet the organization's needs with respect to some of those other areas before we move on to recruiting to some of those other vital functions, but functions which are a little bit further down the line in terms of the scope of need right now. So Lori and I will be focusing on the financial planning, reporting, and accounting function immediately, and that in addition to the COO and to the Director of Corporate Services, as well as the communications function that I spoke about with Brian's assistance. Those will be the areas where we're going to focus on over the course of the remaining 4 months of this year. And this is probably a reasonable place to stop before I continue as well.
Gentlemen, any further questions of Mr. Jankowski relative to where we're sitting in this hierarchy? Okay, I don't see any further questions. Paul, please proceed.
If not, the only other two things I will touch on are the two boxes that I haven't yet spoken about, and this committee and the board will see over the coming months, we'll see us bring forward some recommendations with regards to the hiring of an external auditor. We are going through the process right now of developing an RFP and going out to the marketplace to see if we can't secure those services to ensure that all of our bookkeeping requirements and the audited statement requirements that are part of provincial legislation, make sure that we're well positioned to accomplish those needs or meet those needs relative to the end of year statements, financial statements. And the last position that I've got shown here, but we're not moving forward. I'm not moving forward right now with that position, but it's becoming clear to me that very quickly we're going to have a discussion around what the medium term needs will be in terms of legal support. Certainly, as we start getting into the discussions around creating all of the agreements with the current service, the people that control the current services, we're going to have a plethora of legal support that is going to be required, in addition to that support that will be required for issues such as risk management, insurance, locking up or finalizing our asset management framework, procurement. Though there's going to be an awful lot of legal support work that is going to be required, and I think it's going to become apparent very quickly that in-house legal counsel is probably a more cost-effective way to deal with many of those things as we go through our rapid growth phase in 2022. And that is a position that I'm keeping on kind of on that senior leadership team echelon, if I can call it that, in that tier. I fully anticipate that in the fullness of time, we will have in-house legal counsel as part of the senior leadership team. And that concludes my discussion around the organizational structure and the functions that we're moving forward with starting to resource.
Great, thanks, Paul. Andrew, did you have any questions, Mr. Jankowski, relative to where we're sitting with the kind of the organizational frame out?
No, I don't. Thank you.
Okay, so that's good. So, Mr. Broadhead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just I know you talked about the chief operating officer and you're out to market right now. It's out there in the workplace, to be sure, only because people have texted me about, So what's your response been to date? Have you received a significant number of inquiries that would lead you to believe that we'll get a good response?
We're about halfway through the period of recruitment. We've got a job call out there, and I can't remember the exact date when the competition closes. I would say that at this point, I'm hoping that we're going to get additional quality candidates coming forward. I will say that I think it's a challenging time for us to go out to try to recruit that position. Our neighbors to the south, the city of Calgary, are recruiting for a very similar position, but I would suggest it's probably even a higher profile position given the inclusion of their light rail transit system operations. We're competing with them in terms of the time at which we've gone out to market. I think it's also fair to say that what we're talking about recruiting here is probably one of the top 20 people in the transit industry across North America, and I will say North America as opposed to saying only Canada. At this point, I'm hopeful that we're going to get more quality applicants coming forward. I will say in addition that there is a fairly high degree out there in the marketplace of we're viewed with some degree of uncertainty. I think it's fair to point that out. We're at a fledgling point of the stand-up of our organization, and what we're talking about is trying to recruit somebody likely from a fairly senior level position from a transit authority across Canada or even the United States. There are, I should say, a number of Canadians that are working in those types of positions across the US. It is a very small market, and what we're talking about is attracting somebody from an existing job, an existing opportunity that is well compensated generally in this market. And I think we may need to consider other steps going forward to try to get that kind of quality candidate. But we'll see how this discussion, how this current round of this competition goes.
Yeah, fair enough. Thank you. I did note that Calgary's out for their senior leader as well. So to your point, that does add complexity to the situation. You clearly need somebody with an entrepreneurial spirit to come here to want to be part of a startup, to be sure. So anyway, thanks for that response. Appreciate it.
Thank you. So unless there are further questions on the organizational startup, Mr. Chair, we can certainly move down to the next couple of slides, which really speak to the policy development work that I think it's fair to characterize it as we're now really getting into it with the creation or the hire of the other two members of the senior leadership team. Many of the policies, and perhaps Agata, we can swing to that. Many of the policies that I'm going to speak to over the course of the review of the next two slides are really administrative in nature. And while with the assistance of EY and Sixth Sense, the board carried out the vital work of approving kind of the high level board policies that are listed as the first four elements on this slide. We're now at a point where I'm going to speak to the various administrative policies that certainly I've taken a crack at in terms of some of the wordsmithing of the drafts that were developed under Brittany and Karen's attention. But I think it's fair because many of these policies are going to relate to our broader staff complement. I think it's entirely appropriate for me to sit down with the members of the senior leadership team, and these policies are going to be approved through group discussions. It's not going to be just me that's going to be building the culture of our organization. It is going to be a job of the entire senior leadership team, a never-ending job, I should point out. And certainly as part of that, consideration of the nuances of many of our administrative policies that will apply to our staff team, I think it's appropriate for us to consider those as a senior leadership team, as opposed to just being the CEO's direction. So we have worked, we've done a lot of work already on the first three that you see listed in the legal and compliance section: the conflict of interest, the fitness of work, and fit for work for safety sensitive positions. But there is the finalization that will now be undertaken by the Troika, and perhaps even with future hires coming onto the senior leadership team. Moving on to the next slide, these are really operational policies that we have I've also seen, I've made some initial comments on, but here we will be finalizing them over the course of the next few months. And I've given ourselves a kind of a 30 to 60 day period to finalize some of these. I won't run through them in any great amount of detail here, but certainly as we get to a point of finalizing them, what I intend to do is to share some of the fundamental notions in some of these with this committee in the future. There's one more slide, I believe, that also itemizes those that have been drafted by Brittany and by Karen. But these are ones that I have not yet put my eyes to, and we will certainly move forward with addressing these over the next few months as well. I should mention that there are numerous other policies that will follow these with respect to HR and with respect to the culture that we're going to be building. Many of these are not just policy documents, but they're accompanied by procedures that will be considered for implementation that all of our staff will need to follow. And in addition to these, there are many other policies that are also being developed in other areas such as financial oversight and so on, but those typically would fall outside of the purview of this particular committee. So I'm happy to answer any questions on that work that admittedly is now really getting underway in earnest.
I have no questions personally, but gentlemen, over to you. Okay, I would say there are no questions. Looks like we're okay with that thus far. If we'll probably have some opportunity to kind of chew through or be aware of some of that wording in due course. I would understand. Is that the way I took it, Paul?
Yeah, what I'm intending to do is to kind of bring forward the fundamentals that I can share with this committee for information purposes. I wouldn't want to encumber this committee with wordsmithing the 2, 3, 4, 5-page policies that we're going to develop. But certainly, I think it behooves me to bring some kind of the foundational elements to this committee for the committee's information.
Yeah, I personally would only want to see it within a high-level context more than anything else. So, it's kind of where you come from, these things. We know the work is getting done, and that's half the battle. So for me, that's a crucial step moving forward. So, if you want to proceed, then.
So that brings me to the end of my my update, Mr. Chair, and I will pause here.
So it is now time to go in camera to discuss some matters as provided by the legislation. I would look for the motion that's on the Councillor Muckoff Swain. You're moving the motion.
And not the in camera, just to accept the information as presented. We're going to do that one first before we move in camera. I'll move that the HR and Compensation Committee accept the information and material and discussion as presented during the HR function stand-up update.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. I was too far ahead of myself. So any comments? If there aren't, I call the question. All those in favor, raise their hands. And so approved. Okay, now I would entertain a motion to move in camera. Councillor Broadhead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move that the HR and Compensation Committee move in camera in accordance with the provisions of Division 2, exceptions to disclosure of the Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act, as per sections 16 through 28.
Any questions, comments, clarifications? If not, I would call the question. All those in favor? So approved. So we will now move in camera. And you will provide a breakout room. So if we are reconvened in regular session, we did have a motion that was put forth and voted on by Councillor Muckoff Swain at 5:06 to reconvene in regular session. If there are no other items of business, we've got this motion, the HR compensation. So who would like to move that motion? Councillor Broadhead, I will accept your motion. And with that in mind, all those in favor? Carried unanimously. Yes, and from Councillor Knack. Okay, if there's nothing else, then I will adjourn the meeting at 5:07 p.m. Thank you, gentlemen and ladies, and other personnel who have helped us get this far. Thank you very much. Have a good rest of the week. I've got to huddle off to another meeting, so
Bye now.